Hello and welcome to Half History Will Travel, your weekly dose of history. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and today I want to talk to you about Abraham Lincoln's Russia scandal. When the name Abraham Lincoln comes to mind, you do not think of Russia. You think of the Emancipation Proclamation, that struggle between the Union and the Confederacy. But today I want to take you into 1863 to a little-known episode that occurred when the Russian fleet came into American waters. Yes, a Russian fleet came into American waters, and not just to one port, but two. One Russian fleet went to New York, the other went to San Francisco, and they stayed there from fall of 1863 up until 1864. Today I want to explore why they came here and what was the struggle politically and socially that went on in the United States because of the Russians being in the American harbors. To do that, we must go back to Napoleon, to 1815 in Europe. In 1815, the Congress of Vienna set about to right the wrongs that had been committed during the Napoleonic Wars. Boundaries had been changed, and the Congress of Vienna was set up to change those boundaries and to divide Europe up the way they thought it should be. One of those areas that got divided up was Poland, and Russia, for the most part, got Poland, and they held authority over that area. Poland, wanting to be its own sovereign nation, did have many rebellions or insurrections between 1815 and 1863, the date we're talking about today. But in the early 1860s, one of the most significant insurrections occurred. Polish citizens were impressed into the Russian armies, and many of them had deserted. And so what Russia did was go into Poland and arrest around 2,000 people to put them back into service for the Russian armies. France and Great Britain saw this as an international issue and wanted to bring together the nations of Europe and other nations, including the United States, to decide what was going to happen to Poland. Of course, the United States refused. That goes back to the Monroe Doctrine, where we would not get involved in the affairs of Europe. So now let's get into why did the Russians come to the United States? Well, one of the reasons stems from what happened during the Crimean War, which ran from 1853 to 1856. This war pitted mainly Russia versus France, Great Britain, and the Ottoman Empire. During this war, Russia was cut off maritime-wise, particularly here in the northern coast of Europe and also near the Black Sea. They were trapped. Britain and France had effectively cut off their navy from breaking out of these areas. So when tensions rose again between Russia, France, and Great Britain, Russia did not want that to happen again. So when this conflict started to arise, they immediately sent their fleets away from these entrapment areas. That is why one fleet went to New York City, the other fleet went to San Francisco, and they stayed there for quite a few months. One of the main reasons that Russia sent a fleet to New York City is because if a war did happen to break out, they would have an easy access to the trade routes in the Atlantic Ocean between France, Great Britain, and their colonies in the Western Hemisphere. Now, the horrible treatment of the Polish people by the Russians was not secluded in Europe. People in the United States had heard about this, particularly the Polish immigrants had heard about this. And many Polish immigrants raised money to send to their oppressed brethren in their home country. And with the Russian fleet in New York City and in San Francisco, we have two camps that emerge. Those who supported Russia saw themselves as the Russians did, as trying to suppress an insurrection. The Union was trying to do that with the Confederacy, trying to suppress an insurrection, and so they viewed themselves in the place of the Russians, that they were also trying to suppress an insurrection. The others were the supporters of Poland. They saw Russia as attempting to destroy another nation, like the Confederacy was trying to do to the Union, trying to break apart another nation. Here's an excerpt of a newspaper writing against the Russians being in New York City. Strange to say, amid the roar of cannon thundering freedom to slaves, amid streams of bloodshed in the name of nationality on this side of the Atlantic, amid daily echoes reverberating the groans of butchered martyrs, of mothers and sisters scourged, hanged, or dragged into captivity on the other side, New York had gone mad with enthusiasm for the Muscovites. However, there were lots of supporters of Russia. Here is Gideon Welles, the Secretary of the Navy, saying, in sending them to this country at this time, there is something significant. God bless the Russians. One incident that occurred while the Russian fleet was in New York City was when a Polish sailor had escaped off one of the Russian ships and had joined in with the Union Army. Hoping to keep things peaceful between the two nations, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton ordered General Benjamin Butler to find this soldier and to send him back to the ship. They found the soldier enlisted in the 16th New York Artillery, and he was sent back to the Russian ship where he was allegedly killed for deserting. I want to also mention that while a Russian fleet was in San Francisco, a fire broke out in San Francisco, and some of the Russians helped put out that fire, and so the Russians at San Francisco were looked on as being heroes to an extent, especially once they helped save the town from being burned. Additionally, Mary Todd Lincoln went and visited the fleet in New York City and went aboard one of the ships. Thank you for taking this stroll with me through the historical record and unveiling a story that most people have never heard of. And hopefully it'll promote you to go out and study more history and go and dig a little deeper, because there's all kinds of these small, beautiful stories about the past with the United States, but also with global history. So until next week, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.